So what then is suffering? Suffering, I think, can be summed up as the condition of the jiva. The jiva is the result of the cognitive process which takes the field of experiencing what is going on in this moment and creates the notion that there are objects out there, there are relationships out there, and that there's somebody to experience things, there are things to be experienced. It creates the notion of a self, of an external world, and it gets involved. This self, the jiva, gets involved in these notions. The attention gets hijacked from one to the other. There's a constant search for fulfillment in this process. That search can never be satisfied, and that is suffering. That is the state of the jiva. So I spoke previously about physical pain, and I think that's something different, and that's something which we can never escape unless you're wanting to train the mind to some kind of mental mastery, but that's a different thing. The body is insentient and hence can neither enjoy nor suffer. Nescience gives rise to heedlessness and unwisdom. Hence it is nescience alone that enjoys or suffers. So that's basically what I've just said. It's the condition of the jiva that suffers. It is indeed the mind alone that is born, weeps, kills, goes, abuses others, etc., not the body. In all the experiences of happiness and unhappiness, as also in all the hallucinations and imaginations, it is mind that does everything, and it is mind that experiences all this. Mind is man. Mind is the jiva. Mind is the individualized psyche. And its condition is basically one of frustrated fulfillment. Now, this was all in reply to a question of Ram's, and he wanted to know why the King Lavana underwent all sorts of sufferings. King Lavana was a king of great wisdom who was hypnotized by a travelling juggler, and in the period of 1 hour the king lived a whole life as a primitive tribesman who eventually experienced drought, and he basically had a hellish life. So why should this king of great virtue have undergone such a dreadful life? I shall narrate to you the reason for the sufferings of the king Lavana. Lavana was a descendant of Harishchandra. Lavana thought, "My grandfather performed a great religious rite and became a great man. I should also perform the same rite." He gathered the necessary materials and the religious men, and he performed the rite mentally for a whole year, while sitting in his own garden. One wonders why he bothered gathering the necessary materials and religious men if he was performing the rite mentally. Couldn't he have acquired the materials mentally as well? Since he had thus successfully completed the religious rite performed mentally, he was entitled to its fruits. O Ram, thus you see that mind alone is the performer of all actions, and hence it is also the experiencer of all happiness and unhappiness. Therefore guide your mind along the path to salvation, Ram. Vasistha continued, I myself was a witness to the scene in King Lavana's court, and when they wished to know who that juggler was after he had abruptly disappeared from the court, I saw his identity through my subtle vision, and found that he was a messenger of the gods. It is the tradition that Indra would send all sorts of afflictions to test the strength of anyone who engaged himself in that particular religious rite which Lavana was performing mentally. The hallucinations he had were the result. The rite was performed by the mind, and the hallucinations were experienced by the mind. At the end of King Lavana's hallucinations, he actually abandoned his wife and children and killed himself. Such was his despair. So it seems that Lavana must have failed in this particular test of strength. So I'm not sure that this explanation does King Lavana much credit. When the same mind is thoroughly purified, you will get rid of all duality and diversity which it creates. Ram, I have already narrated to you the process of psychical creation after the previous cosmic dissolution, and of how one comes to entertain the false notions of I and mine. Equipped with wisdom, he who gradually ascends the 7 steps to perfection in yoga attains liberation from these. Ram asked, Holy Sir, what are the 7 steps you have referred to? Vasistha replied, O Ram, there are 7 descending steps of ignorance, and there are 7 ascending steps of wisdom. I shall now describe them to you. To remain established in self-knowledge is liberation. When this is disturbed, there arises egotism and bondage. Now, this is quite an important point here. To remain established in self-knowledge is liberation. I feel I must point this out because some people think that liberation is a once and for all thing. It's like you go through the door and that's it, you're there, you've made it. And occasionally there are things in the scriptures which seem to back that up. But it is saying here, when this is disturbed, there arises egotism and bondage. In other words, liberation can be disturbed. And it fits in with something that I said previously, again in relationship to Buddhism. The Buddha's teachings is often presented as the 8-fold path, but occasionally there is a 10-fold path, the last 2 stages being right insight and right liberation. And given that the path is a practice, it's possible that liberation is a practice as well. It's something which is very easily found, but then the effort has to be made to keep going back to it. It's rather like going off on holiday and finding a nice holiday destination, and then when you come back and you tell people about it, and you never actually go back to it. You just enjoy stories about it. We mustn't confuse the stories with actually being there. But the point is, the practice has to be made. You have to keep going back to liberation. That is the practice.